Hey guys, we're doing something completely different today. I am literally going to scroll through my phone and find your questions in our Facebook groups and answer them. We've never done this before. It could be your question. Let's go ahead and dive in. Hey everybody, I am Katelyn James. I'm so excited that you have found my YouTube channel and that you are a part of this. This is a place where I love to educate and empower photographers to build profitable and purposeful businesses while also letting you into our day-to-day life. So I am excited to do this because I've never done this before, and it feels very unplanned and very not like what I normally do. But I'm thrilled because I think it's going to be fun, and I think that there are a lot of questions that are being asked because people really genuinely struggle with this. So I'm excited to answer questions that I think will help people in a very practical way. So this is a question from our lighting and location course group. Lindsay said, I feel like I understand this course, but I also feel myself forgetting frequently to do it when I photograph and scout for locations. So I actually responded to this comment already, and I explained that it is a learning process. When you are in the lighting and locations course, I teach you how to find and order your priorities in light, location, layout. And so that's the order that everything should be determined. If this is a good location or not. Is the light good? That's the first thing. Is the location good? Is the background okay? That's the second thing. And then you lay out how your clients are going to be in this location once you determine that it's a right place for you to stay. So if you struggle with this, I gave the example, and you're going to make fun of me, but I gave the example of how I actually got better at this and practicing light, location, layout. When I was in college, and I spent a lot of time on the road. I went to college on a peninsula in Virginia, so a lot of my weddings were in DC. It was 4 or 5 hour drive every weekend. And I remember when I was so new to photography, I would constantly look for portrait locations in the median of the interstate, highway, whatever you call your big roads in your state. That's what we call them. We call them interstates. And there are beautiful trees and kind of tall grasses in the median of our road. And even if you don't have medians like we do here in Virginia, maybe you could just look on the side of the road. I'm constantly looking, even at stoplights. If there's a cute flower bed with like a weeping willow tree, I'm looking at that area on the side of the road and I'm thinking, could I shoot there? Is the light good? I'm looking around like, is there access to secondary light? Is there access to the sky? Then I'm looking at the background, like, is there a way that I could hide all the cars in the background with the leaves from this willow tree? And then if I could shoot here, how would I lay it out? I would literally sit at stoplights and think like that. And I know that that sounds so crazy, and I know that doesn't sound like it would make a huge impact, but it honestly did, because I did that so much. I was constantly analyzing locations so much that when I was actually on a shoot, it started to come naturally to me. It was like I could never forget light, location, layout, because I spent all my free time daydreaming, driving, and looking at the median of the road and thinking, that'd be a good spot, or can't shoot there, there's no secondary light. So I trained myself to start noticing these things even when I wasn't shooting. It's almost like you have to do the work beforehand in order to be ready to go when it's actually game time. So I didn't want to do a lot of practice shoots. I didn't have time, honestly, to do a lot of practice shoots just to get better at this. So I just trained myself to pay attention to those things, and I still do it to this day. I can look out in our backyard right now. It's about 4 p.m. in the middle of June, and I can look at my backyard and I can tell the light that I see in my backyard right now, I know that I can't use it. It's too much of a black hole in the background. It's access to the sky, diffused backlighting, but there's a black hole. Would never shoot there. I have trained myself to be able to notice that, and you can too. So maybe you have a new goal when you're driving around, picking kids up from school, when you're on road trips. Pay attention to finding locations just mentally while you're daydreaming in the car, and this will make a huge difference when it comes time to apply this knowledge when you're on a real shoot. So this is a simple question. This question is from Sarah, and it's actually for East Coast photographers. So West Coast photographers, don't tune me out, but hear me out. The question is, East Coast beach photographers, do you prefer sunrise or sunset? And this is really hard because honestly, I don't do a ton of beach photography, but whenever I have on the East Coast, I have always found myself so frustrated with the lighting. Why? Because on the East Coast, the sun is setting in the west. So that means when you have clients standing with the water in the background, you have bright orange sunset light hitting them on the face. It is almost impossible to have backlighting unless you wait until the sun is creeping over behind the houses, behind the dunes. It's very, very tricky. So sunrise is preferred. Sunrise, you have more control over backlighting, especially if you're there right when the sun comes up and it's not so intense that the water is a massive reflection. I would say if you're an East Coast beach photographer, you're going to have to figure out what works well for you. There are some people who shoot on inlets where they can kind of turn just slightly enough to get really good glow and still see some water. But the traditional East Coast beach setup can be a big challenge. And so I prefer to shoot at sunrise. I've done it several times in my career. But I would also recommend contacting people who shoot on the beach all the time, like someone like Amanda Hedgepeth. She lives in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. She photographs on the beach constantly, and she has so many great tips about how to make it work for you and how to avoid crazy intense lighting scenarios. I'll make sure that I link her below. Are you ready for another one? Let's do another one. This is from Sierra. Sierra said, hey y'all, I'm just wondering how you base your pricing. I'm really struggling with being confident and comfortable with my pricing. I've had clients tell me you're so affordable, or if I went with anyone else, I'd be paying at least triple what I'm paying you. I immediately know what I'm going to say to you. I'm fairly new. I'll be a year in July, and I want to charge what I'm worth, but I have no clue how to figure that out. Any tips are appreciated. Let me tell you right now. What your client said to you is the greatest gift, because what they're telling you when they make those comments is that you are worth so much more. And I know it's hard to look at yourself and say, but I'm only a year into this, but I'm looking at your work and you've got a natural gift. You know exactly what you're doing. And this is so hard because you're looking at other people who maybe have been doing this for 5, 6, 7 years, and they're just charging a little bit more than you. And you're thinking, I can't raise my prices, but you can. And I was in a similar place to you when I first started my business. I grew really fast, my first 2 years, really fast. And I remember raising my prices. And I think my own dad even said, Katelyn, you got to slow down. But the demand and the excitement was there, and people were saying to me what people are saying to you, Sierra. They were saying, I can't believe you're so affordable. And it'd be nice to be able to keep wowing people with how affordable you are, but eventually you will stop making sense to people. And I actually saw another post earlier today where someone was talking about pricing and talking about how they're getting ghosted and it doesn't make sense because they're not even that expensive. But I looked on their website and their work was gorgeous. And the problem is some photographers are so scared to raise their prices, and they justify not raising their prices by saying, I'm only a year in. I can't raise my prices. I'm so new. I don't have enough experience to raise my prices. And they focus on that instead of focusing on supply and demand and what people are saying and speaking about, that they lose their golden opportunity of growth. You have a beautiful opportunity and natural talent that could allow you to charge a lot more very, very quickly. And that is not wrong. That's a sign of a great business owner, a successful business owner. It's not unfair to other people who aren't charging the same amount. If you are in a situation where your clients are saying, oh my gosh, I'd have to pay triple for this anywhere else, that's a red flag. Right? You don't want to end up in the dead zone where you are not charging enough, but yet your work is spectacular and you don't make sense to people who want to invest in high-end photography. And I don't say that as kind of like this fantasy situation, like the dead zone. Is it really real? Oh, it's real. It is real. And I have seen hundreds of photographers get stuck there. So my encouragement to you is to listen to your clients. Think about supply and demand. If you're constantly getting people saying you're too expensive, or constantly getting people shocked at how cheap you are, that's going to tell you something about where you stand price point wise. And I would also encourage you to try not to think about your experience level, because when you think about your experience level, you can always downplay what you think you're worth. Always, especially when you're as new, Sierra, as you are. So being new does not mean that you can't add value quickly. Being new and adding value quickly just means that you probably have a very natural gift, and you should take advantage of that. Okay, so this is from Krista. And Krista said, hey guys, how do you handle when someone asks you if you will travel far for your engagement session? It's stated in our pricing guide the amount of miles we travel, but I still struggle with the wording of it when someone asks for a specific place and probably just read over that part. This would be 7 hours total of driving in one day. Yikes. I'm looking for help with wording in an email if anyone has ideas or experience about this. Or if you decide to travel, how would you go about charging? I would want to charge for extra time, not just mileage, because it would be a full day. So this is a great question. And it's such an awkward question, right? Because you feel like you're so excited they've booked you, right? They're already spending X amount of dollars with you. And then they have this dream location for the engagement session. And it's like, oh no, I don't want to tell them I can't do it. I don't want to disappoint them. But as a business owner, you have to be the one sometime to educate them on what this would mean for you. I hate to say it, but we have run into this several times in our business where there are brides who are engaged and they're excited and they're like all about planning their wedding. And when you run a personally based business, they feel like they're best friends with you, and that is awesome. But sometimes they forget that you don't just spend your whole life getting excited to drive 7 hours to their engagement session. Sometimes they're just so busy and so excited they forget that this is a huge ask. And so for me, since we've had children, I normally refer back to childcare and what is possible for us. And if we need to extend that, further than like 3 to 4 hours and do more like 7 hours total, we would love to do that. But our pricing would change because it's a significant amount of time. And so it's not that I'm using my children as an excuse, but I guess I kind of am. You don't have to use children as an excuse. Maybe if you don't have children, or if you have childcare that's built in and it doesn't affect you financially, that would make something different for you. But I would say, you have to be the one to point out what is the commitment that you're committing to. A lot of times people are unaware of that. And you would think that a bride would think through like, oh, they've got to prep and then they've got to drive and they got to do the shoot and they got to drive home. And oh my gosh, that's a 7-hour commitment for this photographer. But sometimes they don't realize it. So that's tip number 1, is to make sure that you explain to them, hey, this would actually be a 7-hour day for me. And I want nothing more than to do this engagement session exactly where you want to do it, because I know this spot is sentimental to you. So I do think that I can make some exceptions, but I'm going to have to run some numbers and figure out what the mileage and the time cost would be, because it's very far outside of what our normal range is, which is mentioned on page 3 of our pricing guide. So you can refer back to the pricing guide. You can let them know you normally travel. For us, we travel 60 miles for free. And so you can refer back to what it says in your pricing guide, but you're not making them feel bad. They missed that. You're also letting them know that you're very interested in doing it, but you just need to figure out what that's going to cost them and what it's going to cost you. And so I almost envision a response to this explaining you're excited, you want to do it, but it's a big ask and you just got to figure out if it's feasible. And then when you respond like that, that gives them an opportunity to then respond back knowing the commitment that you're signing up for, and deciding if they're willing to pay. And that's okay. It's not a dig at them to tell them that this is a huge ask for you. You're not going to word it like that, but you can respond to this type of question and this type of situation in a way that is still professional, but also still personal. You still want to give them the best experience ever. You just need to know if they're okay with what it's going to cost them. It's not fun. I hate talking about mileage. I really, really do. I hate it when we've had some destination couples in the past just kind of forget that they had to pay for lodging. They thought they were just paying for flights. And it's a really hard conversation to say, oh, sorry, no, that was a part of this, agreement. I mentioned that in the pricing guide. That's why it's a part of your contracted price. And so we've had some hard conversations about that. But as a business owner, you have to do that sometimes. And it's not comfortable and it's not easy, but it is worth it. If you're wondering where the majority of these questions are coming from, they're coming from the KJ Education Facebook group. Some of them are coming from our other course groups, but the KJ Education Facebook group is actually a free Facebook group. You don't have to be a student of ours. You can join it and learn and grow. We have very strict rules about being kind and encouraging to one another. It's a very happy place for photographers to learn and grow. Those are our only big rules. So I just would invite you, if you aren't a part of it and you love to be, there's a link below where you can join it. So this is from Tanya, and she says, hi, I'm honestly a little bit confused about the whole diffused light thing. Faces accessing the sky. I feel like most places I'm scouting, faces do have access to the sky and also have short grass that reflect a green tint. I feel like I'm just missing this concept somehow in real life. Are there any pointers on finding locations like this and what I should be looking for? So basically she's talking about the concept where I've said, if you are shooting in a backlit situation, in order as a natural light photographer to shoot in a backlit situation, you have got to have access to the sky. So your clients have to be able to look out and see the sky. But a lot of times photographers will say, oh, I can see the sky over there. And they think this has to be good. Instead of really processing and thinking critically, like, yes, I can see the sky, but is it enough sky? Like, is that enough sky to overpower the intensity of the green reflection coming up from the grass? A lot of times photographers, and it's not wrong, like I don't blame them at all, but they take the rules from these courses and they make them so black and white that it's actually a hindrance to them. So saying, yes, my clients could see access to the sky, but it's really just a little opening between two trees. Really, let's think a little bit more critically and think, okay, that's not a huge opening though. And the light intensity, the backlighting is actually pretty intense, which means the reflection from the grass in front of them is pretty intense. So if that is more intense, then I'm going to need even more ambient secondary light. I'm going to need more access to the sky to overpower their green skin. So it's a hard concept to learn, but once you start paying attention to these things and these aspects of these locations, you will start to train yourself to see almost like a formula, like, okay, the sun is pretty high, the reflection's pretty intense. I'm going to need more access to the sky than normal, instead of just saying, as long as I can see the sky in any capacity, it's going to work. When you start processing almost like a ratio, like the sun's intense, I have huge access to the sky. So those ratios, that's gonna work. I think that's gonna work. Or the sun is not that intense. I don't have a big opening in the sky, but maybe because the backlighting on the back of their heads isn't as intense, maybe I can get away with that little bit of access to the sky, and maybe it would work for you. So thinking about it as it's not all or nothing, you got to think about it in kind of ratios and formula perspective of how much do I need based off the intensity of light and the intensity of the reflection on the ground. That is going to determine whether or not your access to the sky needs to be incredibly big or it could be minimal. So it's practice. It's such practice. I know that it's hard to conceptualize the idea of secondary light. I used to call it invisible light because you literally can't see it. It's a concept that only photographers will probably ever understand. Secondary light is the secret to beautiful skin tones, and yet it's one of the hardest things to master as a natural light photographer, but it is possible. We see hundreds of photographers master it every few months in our lighting and locations course. So if you want more information about that, you can click the link below. We have several links below that you can kind of find either free resource in the KG Education group, or you can find free webinars and trainings where you don't have to pay for anything, or you can dive in and truly gain incredible in-depth or you can dive in. Sorry.
You just like pounded at yourself.
Okay. I'm almost done.
Yeah, you're so close.
So you can either dive into free education like the KJ Education Group, or you can dive into free trainings like webinars. We have a lot of free information out there, or you can really dive into in-depth education and join one of our courses. So all of the information is below. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this was helpful. And if you enjoy this type of YouTube episode, let me know and I will do more. I'll pay more attention to finding really great questions to answer on this platform. Make sure you subscribe and like below so that you don't miss anything in the future. Thanks for tuning in.